Welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting for Monday the 11th of October. Before we start the council meeting, we'll be holding a public forum, and we need to know that this public forum is being audio recorded for administrative purposes. By speaking at the public forum, you agree to being recorded. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this public forum that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Borubi City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this public forum. Just to let you know, the public forum is being held in accordance with the Code of Meeting Practice. The speakers will have 5 minutes to speak, whether they're on Zoom or in the chamber. We must be respectful at all times, and the speakers must limit their presentation to the specific business paper item they're speaking to. And at the end of the 5 minutes, the councillors will be given the opportunity to ask the speakers questions. So that's the context of this particular public forum. So without further ado, I'll start the public forum. So PF 2.1, Mr. Philip Collins, it's item 13.1. It's the DA 10.2021.38281, the Borubi, Cotlers Road, Borubi Road, Springdale Heights subdivision, and he does not support the recommendation. Is he on the screen? Or is he here? Here he is, just up at the lectern.
Should be on. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good.
Good.
Clear as a bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to give just to express the opinions and present my video that I actually did on the actual site itself. My main concerns is the upgrade of Borubi from this estate. Probably not only just the Borubi leading up the hill, but across the hill as well. And it's the impact on the basically the wildlife and bird life that we actually get down through that corridor from Red Light Hill area. You'll see on the video, and you'll see my expressions of worry that I have for this particular area. So maybe if we just play the video. I actually live down at the junction of Borubi and Baronga on the southern side, just along a little bit. Let me state from the outset, I'm not against the development, but I do object to the funneling of traffic from a 43-lot development back into the top end of a 40-year-old established estate. The intention of this video is to show the impact environmentally the traffic from the subdivision will have on a well-established wildlife corridor from the Red Light Hill area. This corridor was established roughly 40 years ago as part of the original Springdale Heights subdivision. It runs from the top of Borubi all the way down to Cotlers Road. I have personally been involved for the last 35 years trying to stimulate the movement through that corridor by planting and maintaining the landscape between Baronga and Baronga. The impact of that work has had a marked effect on wildlife movement. Several of my neighbours have contributed to that success by maintaining their gardens to enhance the impact. The Borubi City Council has also provided support over the years, specifically with the addition of a water supply in the park between Baronga and Baronga Way, without which would have made it an impossible job. I thank you for the opportunity to state my case. Most of the wildlife we get through this area are only visitors, but they actually come down into the residential area and they may only stay a day or so and then they leave and go back up through the corridor again, back up into the hills. Echidnas are quite a regular visitor. Even the kangaroo mobs that are back up on the hill come down every so often when things get a bit dry and they'll graze in these grassed areas late at night and then they go back up again. All the plants and basic, apart from the big gum trees, are just about everything that I've planted and grew over 37 odd years. Well, this is the second go in it. Different colours to the first one. And quite a bit bigger. The Maggies don't like the goannas. Oh, we didn't get the end of it. Oh.
Mm.
So basically, that's why I'm worried about the big volume increase in traffic and the fact that basically the wildlife won't want to be crossing an upgraded Borubi right across the hillside.
Well, thank you, Mr. Collins. Pictures speak 1,000 words. Councillor Thurley, question.
I just want to make sure I'm really clear. You do not oppose the subdivision. You simply are concerned about the access and egress from that subdivision.
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? No, all good. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your presentation. Very colourful. Okay. Our next speaker is Mr. James Dwyer, and same item, but does not support any of the recommendations.
Thank you, Mayor, and the rest of the council and the public that are here today. I want to bring up a number of points. I wish to bring to council's attention a number of points that I wish to contest and the information that I have had very little time to peruse. One, the traffic reports that the development will only have a 4% increase on Springdale Heights. It does not mention that Borubi Road will have a 700% increase I would consider that a major impact on our area and Baronga Drive as well. Secondly, council report states that the line of sight to the west of Baronga Drive is not long enough for 50k street. So to bring more traffic onto the road below a crest is dangerous. While the curved street to the east of Baronga Drive has a terrible visibility, as previously stated, I would also ask councillors to view the area to see the actual dangers and the shortness of sight. 3, council's own arborists strongly advised against using Borubi Road as access to the damage caused to the trees in Borubi Road. I know some of the trees could be left, but I'm sure with the actual road works, there'll be a lot of damage to the roots of those old trees and they will end up dying. 4th, and this is my main argument to this whole development, the bushfire report in the surrounding development area states that the land to the north is heavily vegetated, representing a bushfire hazard. Section 5.2 of the bushfire protection states that the subdivision will be serviced by a connected road network which leads away from the fire hazard. I feel this is totally untrue, reason being that the streets in the development head straight north towards any fire and west where a grass fire or more fire could develop in the creek area where the culvert is proposed to go. There have been 2 fires in the area in the last 20 years, the most recent about 4 years ago, which resulted in the police blocking the road, and the public onlookers caused havoc, blocking my access to save cattle from the fire at the time. Imagine the panic of another 43 properties trying to evacuate or get into their properties. And 5thly, as development has a 15-metre corridor to Kiteless Road, there was no reason why an 8-metre road could be not constructed to Kiteless Road. As for the drainage adjustments on Kiteless Road, the same would be needed at the junction of Borubi Road and Baronga Drive. Now, the original development had the outlet to Kiteless Road and an outlet, second one to Borubi Road. And at the time, I was told that there had to be 2 outlets onto this because of the fire danger. And I just can't see how it can now go ahead with the roads going to the north directly to where a fire would be. And I have been a fire captain for 15 years and been the fire brigade for 50 years. I've been to plenty of fires and I can tell you they can do a lot of terrible things. So I think you should look at it as from the fire point of view, there has to be an outlet to the south. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be consistent. You are not opposed to the subdivision, you simply have concerns about traffic and
Yep.
other matters.
That's right. Yep.
Can I have a follow-up question to Mr Christie, please?
Mr Christie? There is another question for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
My question is, this requirement or the desirability to have 2 ways out of this subdivision, is that stated explicitly, or is it a requirement of any act relating to bushfires?
Thank you for the question and for you, Mr Mayor. So the latest application was referred to the New South Wales Rural Fire Services Integrated Development, and so they did not raise any concerns with development. They did provide back their general terms of approval. In the past, if they've had concerns with development, they've asked for further information to address those concerns.
I asked a question.
Okay, councillor Gleichen, question.
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. It's been suggested that should the road be put through that space and widened, that tree root damage would kill those trees that were to be left. Can one of our staff respond to that, please, and provide us with information as to whether that is likely or not, or what success rate we have?
Mr Christie?
Thank you for the question and for you, Mr Mayor. And it was Mr Dean, wasn't it? Sorry.
Why? Yeah.
Dwyer, sorry, my mistake. So we was up there about the arborist raised concerns, and that is correct. That was the initial concern. It is outlined and I don't have a copy, my hard copy of my report with me. My apologies, councillors, I can refer to it later. But it's referred that initially, if it was to be just purely 8 metres wide, I guess built as you would normally build a normal road, that there were concerns raised by our environmental team and our arborists around potential impact on a number of mature vegetation, especially towards the front where Borubi Road hits Baronga Drive. That's why there was a condition that's outlined later in the report for the road to be designed as such. And then they were fairly confident that any tree removal would be minimised. And the idea is to try to obviously get any disturbance from outside the drip line of trees to minimise that damage.
Yes, and further clarifying point, please.
Yeah.
If I may.
No worries.
And so the new road design from my reading of the report indicates that it will not have a footpath attached to the road. So that would then minimise decrease the width of the road to accommodate for the trees and their roots.
Thank you for the question, for you, Ms. Mayor. That's the idea. The idea was to push it over to one side. And to do that, what you do is you remove the footpath, which would normally have on that side. And the idea is they've got a footpath instead going down through that access handle connection down to Keitlers Road.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Just one question in relation to the assertion about a road being able to be connected to Keitlers Road, Mr. Christie. In the report, it mentions the high power electricity line running through there and the issues with the area and the barriers associated with that. Looking at the design and looking at the land below it, which has been sold and fenced off, is that possible or not?
Thank you for the question for you, Ms. Mayor. So with the 15 metres wide, without going on to the adjoining parcel, no, would not normally be wide enough for consideration that there's the transgrid infrastructure in there. Also, as it's covered by about a 30 metre wide transgrid easement, it's required to be sent to them, and their guidelines normally allow for traversing of public road. So they like it to cross at points, but at short sharps. The idea where it follows entire road follows their easement and thus their infrastructure is normally against their guidelines. In the past, they've objected to such developments.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Mr. Dwyer. No further questions?
Can I?
Thank you for your
say something
presentation.
else?
Yeah, you can follow up. Yeah.
There is another entry onto Banook
Yep.
place. That would be another option, but that wouldn't have been my favourite option, but that's another way to the south. Because I still cannot understand how the developers said that the road was heading north away from the fire. Well, if north is going north towards the fire, I just can't see how they passed that. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's what.
No,
I was
thank you.
saying.
Thank you for that. It is something that we've discussed already, so we can discuss it later on in the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Con, did you have a question with it?
I did for Mr. Christie, please, not for the speaker.
Mr. Christie?
My questions are to do with the block to the south. It seems like those two blocks ending up in separate ownership is the real cause of most of this angst. I'm interested to know when they were subdivided into two blocks and how the access was intended to ever get to this block when that subdivision happened.
Thank you for the question and for you, Mr. Mayor. To find the precise times, I admit I would have to find out when the subdivision did occur to split off those two parcels. The two parcels have been separately zoned for a while because the parcel, so to speak, to the south, the one that more fronts Keitlers Road, is zoned industrial, and this portion of the parcel up on the northern portion, one way to describe it, the one fronting Borubi Road is zoned residential and has been for a number of years, but I would have to take on notice as to when the subdivision occurred to split those two parcels off. And then also if subsequently, if they might have been in the same ownership, obviously, when they were first split, as to when any subsequent sale occurred to put them in separate
Yeah,
ownership.
that was going to be my second question. So we don't know when they changed.
I would have to take that on notice, Councillor Con.
So that would have been after 2007 when they made the initial application for the DA, which is in the reports, would it not?
You would think it was likely to be. I guess it might have been an application over two parts. So obviously it's not unusual to have application over more than one property. So I'll just be double checking to see what the configuration might have been back in 2007. to see if it was similar to what it is now or if it was one parcel in its entirety and subsequently subdivided.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no further questions. Our next speaker is Jess Tomich, and she's supposed to be on Zoom. Are you there, Jess? Speaking against the same subdivision. There she is on Zoom. Thanks, Jess.
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Fantastic. So I do apologise. This isn't my natural habitat, so I will be reading off of something. Look, I'm here speaking this evening as a concerned resident of Baronga Drive in Springdale Heights, with my view and the view of many others, as you've heard this evening, of the residents and in my surrounding areas, being that the council should refuse or at a minimum request a redesign of this application. My reasoning for discussion tonight is around the traffic and resident safety of both Baronga Drive and that of the only an entry exit point proposed for the 43 lots being Borubi Road. I have read the report put forward by the proponents and have several concerns regarding their interpretation of what's been deemed safe and fair for those of us who already reside in this area. The current intersection of Baronga Drive and Borubi Road is small and only utilised by residents of several rural properties above me. By now, I trust you've all seen the photos attached to the report, and some of you have also come out and viewed the road and its intersection in its current state, and I appreciate that. Thanks, Kevin. We also encourage those of you who are unfamiliar with our area to come for a drive and use our roads, as this might better help understand our concerns. This DA, albeit in very different versions, has been seen before. In the current report, it states that as recently as 2020, discussions were held with the planning staff at the council regarding proposed accesses for the development and the concerns held by the council at that time. To answer a question that was asked earlier, it was 2016 when the proponents stated that the access via Keitlers Road, previously an option in an earlier submission, was no longer an option, as the proponents had then sold the land south of the now proposed lots and it was industrially zoned. Even mentioned was the alternate access off Borubi Road being then questionable due to the likely opposition by nearby residents. This is still extremely valid and we still very much oppose. Please explain to me how and why this is now the issue of existing residents in my area. Why are we to be punished by the decisions of the proponent to sell the land that would have provided a logical direct route through to Keitlers Road? Instead, now deeming it an option to create a more hazardous T intersection, among other disruptions to the road and the area they plan to upgrade. I have provided some photos just to push forward my speaking points this evening. You'll see here photos 1 and photos 2 are of Borubi Road, which is taken from Baronga Drive. And here, this resident is 36 Baronga Drive, and they've asked me to actually speak on their behalf this evening because they are unable to do so. As you can see here, this is the current driveway of the property, which has been in existence for 30 plus years. It leads almost directly into the intersection of Baronga Road and Borubi Road, which the resident has stated is already tricky to use in its current state. In the report also, provided by the proponent as one of the reasons given by council for the proponent as to why they couldn't use the battle axe to connect their land to Keitlers Road was it was within 5 metres of an already existing driveway. As you can clearly see here is this resident's driveway. As the resident hadn't received anything in regards to this from the proponent themselves, they contacted the council and they were made aware that if the road was to be widened and redeveloped, that the proponent would be responsible to reinstate a new driveway for the dwelling. The resident has concerns regarding this, considering their landscape, as you can see, is extremely well established, and the current car housing they have makes it almost impossible for them to put their driveway anywhere else. They also wish to have their views put forward that they were shocked that all this could even be considered without their consultation. Photos 3 and 4 are of Baronga eastbound approach to Borubi Road. I'll just wait for those to come up. There they are. As it states in the traffic report submitted for this meeting, the Baronga Drive eastbound approach does not meet the minimum safe intersection site distance, SISD, of 97 metres. It falls short by a staggering 17 metres. Surely this is a huge red flag for council and enough in its own merit to request a redesign of access for the proposed development. We have large concerns as residents that if this DA is approved, that the standard of safety is not set to the maximum, yet merely good enough. This obstruction of view, as you can clearly see, is a hill, and without the reconstruction of Baronga Drive itself, this will always be a dangerous section of road. This intersection was not designed or will ever be safe for whatever the proponents are proposing with the increase of dwellings as well as the vehicles per dwelling. The report also references a traffic count provided by Peter Meredith Consulting and grossly underestimates the current and proposed traffic movements in this area. The report was requested, conducted, and provided in a pandemic, around or during a state lockdown, which saw large numbers of us either working from home, homeschooling, or at a complete standstill. The count was conducted by a person parked in a car during a weekday on our street for 1 to 2 hours. Can I ask why the count wasn't conducted by a electronic traffic counter, which would have provided us surely more accurate reading over a decent space of time? I challenged the vehicles per dwelling, with Albury City's numbers stating that approximately 48 of the area's households have more than one vehicle. The statistics used and the numbers deemed likely for this area as not factual, but merely taken from RMS data as an approximate for any urban rural area. In summary, this may not be the view of all residents, but that of my own. I am not opposed to the subdivision itself. I am opposed to the only entry and exit point put through on this DA. This road and intersection upgrade will force those current and proposed future residents to undoubtedly engage in unsafe and hazardous road practices to navigate in and out of the area. I urge the council to strongly consider the impacts of our area before pushing more traffic into an already dangerous street. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Questions, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. The first is about the traffic count. Was the traffic count conducted simply by a person doing visual observation, or, as would be more common, by placing counters on a road?
Sorry, was that question for me or for someone?
Sorry, it's a member of staff.
Mr. Christie.
No, go.
Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr. Mayor. Both methods are considered appropriate. So when prior to this, I made certain I confirmed with our team of traffic and transport that she was comfortable with the methodology undertaken for the traffic assessment, and the traffic assessment either can be via visual methods or by counter methods.
Can I say something in response to that, please?
Yep.
Well, I understand the comment made. I can assure you, and you can ask any person who lives in this street, there has been no electronic traffic counters used. The person who did do the counting was actually approached by several residents, because we do know basically every car that comes up here, and they were parked in the street for 1 to 2 hours. So we did approach them and ask them what they were up to. And the numbers were then approximated. So I would very much love for someone to come and stand on the street. I saw more cars pass here in 20 minutes on Saturday than that's in that report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Con, question? One more follow-up. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you didn't come out and ask me what I was doing while I was cruising around up there. My other question is relating to the ownership of the land. So my understanding is that all of the land, part of this present subdivision and down to Keitlers Road, was owned by the same person, but has sold off that parcel, which now prohibits or prevents access to Keitlers Road. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question for you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, they are in separate ownerships. As I indicated before to councillors, I'd have to see about when that might have occurred. It may not have been the current owner who sold. It may have been a previous owner. So I'd have to take an advice in that respect. But yes, they are both in separate ownership.
Yeah.
May I speak to that, please?
Yes, Councillor Tomic.
No. One day. what I'd just like to ask you to think about is that the original DA for this land was seen in 2007 when it was one giant block owned by the same person. Regardless of when it was sold, this person has chosen to sell land perfectly aware that one day they would look to still continue with the subdivision. It's been seen several times before in different capacities. So they've chosen not to allow or keep enough land to run a safe access road to the logical space being Keitlers, and have chosen to sell maximum land to the south at that time. So my consideration here is that that's all well and good for them, but why is it now, when it's even noted in the report that we were likely to oppose, is it deemed even feasible to consider using this road to facilitate 43 new dwellings?
Thank you for the rhetorical question, Councillor Tomich. Councillor Con.
Thank you. Question through to the relevant member of staff regarding the transgrid infrastructure that's in the battle axe handle coming off Keitlers Road. Purely from an engineering point of view, is it feasible to underground the power line?
Thanks for the question. And then for you, Mr. Mayor, again, I don't want to be seen to be passing the buck, but that is something I'll definitely have to take on notice. We know from our own infrastructure projects that undergrounding of power lines can be problematic, can be issues around accessing power lines, maintenance and the like. And Mr. Ferris may or may not have some more to add, so I'd have to take on notice in regards to that, but I do know that it has been an issue in the past, even with council developments around undergrounding power lines.
Mr. Ferris, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it would depend on if Transgrid were obviously willing to consider undergrounding that section of main, which then would potentially allow some vehicular access. But as Mr. Christie said, some of those discussions around undergrounding power have come up against some concerns from the distributor.
Follow-up question?
Yep.
Are you aware of the developer of this subdivision ever making inquiries about the possibility of undergrounding the power lines?
Thanks for the question. I'll get that for you, Mr. Mayor. So regards to the power lines, because there's two sets of power lines that traverse this property. So one's on the eastern side and on the western side. And they are two separate easements. One's Essential, one's Transgrid. So I do know that they did make some representation to Essential Energy about undergrounding their power lines, but I could not confirm whether there was anything in regards to Transgrid. We do have Mr. Hunter, I believe, later on, and he may be able to answer on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Any further questions, councillors? No. Thank you, Jess, for your presentation, and it's a lot to consider. Okay. Next presenter is Mr. David Hunter. He's supposed to be on Zoom. There he is. Okay, David, you're speaking in relation to this development, and of course, you're speaking in support. You're representing the developer. Thank you, David.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yep, all clear.
Excellent. Yeah, so I'm from Habitat Planning. We've been engaged as the town planning consultant for this application. With me, but just off screen, is Scott Hunter, no relation, who is from Aubrey Land Developments and who has prepared the concept plans for this development. We can answer some questions later on if any arise. So no doubt council are now aware of the property that makes up the application. It's outlined on the map here just to help for some of the context. And it's addressed as 186 Keitlers Road, and obviously has the battle axe lot, the battle axe road, should I say, running to the south, and about 130 metres of the road on Borubi at the north. It's a balanced portion of the Springdale Heights development area. It's been undeveloped for quite a while. And if you go to the next page, Terence, it might just zoom in and give a bit more context, but you can see the stub of road at Baronga Way which wraps around the bottom, or was intended to wrap around the bottom of the reserve, and obviously hasn't been extended, but I'll talk about that soon. Land to the south and the east, as has been discussed in some of the other submissions, is zoned industrial. That land, neither of those parcels of land are in the same ownership as the applicant. The red areas on the western side are the transgrid easements, the high voltage lines, and the narrower section on the eastern side is the essential energy easements that run through. So there's also a water main that runs through the centre. So it's quite a constrained site in terms of easements, and quite unique in its location and its form. If we can just go to the next sheet. There's been some discussion around the previous approvals. So this is the plan that was previously approved for the site in 2007. At the time, that subdivision, it is my understanding that was in 2 lots. I believe that you can see the lot layout shown lightly sort of hatched in black along the side, and you can see there's reference to that road or that battle axe handle coming up the western side. At the time, it was in the same ownership, and you can see that the road has been shaped to run around those stays and up into the land, and then obviously have another access point out onto Borubi Road. The applicant didn't act on that subdivision, and therefore it's expired in around 2012 by my count. If you could go to I might need to go to the last page, sorry, I think I might have to, yeah, thank you. Obviously access is the major issue, and this has been apparent for quite some time for the developer, and it's been highlighted, of course, in many of the submissions. So, as I've said, the 2007 plan included the 2 access points. The main issue which has arisen since that time is the transgrid policy around easements, and the major issue of that being that the road itself can't run parallel within the transgrid easement, so it can't run north-south in either of those easements to run along the western side. So there isn't the possibility for that road to be placed in that 15-metre handle. So, and it's not around the ability of whether there's enough width, it's around the fact that that can't physically be placed there and meet the transgrid policy requirements. There's also horizontal separation distances around the transmission poles that can't be achieved. So on the basis that that wasn't a possibility, the applicants investigated several other options. The first one obviously was around any opportunity at Baronga Way, which was at some time the intended road connection to run through. Obviously that's not possible because lots have been created between Baronga Way and the subject land, so that can't be achieved. One of the earlier submitters referred to the next court, Barrett Place, that's further up. That was an option that the landowner has discussed with council. It's obviously it's a smaller road, it's a narrower road, but it does abut the reserve. However, council officers have indicated that they didn't support that road being constructed through the reserve. So really that's left the only option to be Borubi Road to come from the north of the property. So with that in mind, they've worked to try and shape that road along the road reserve, and particularly in the western part, which you can see in this plan. This is the most recent plan, and it's been pulled to the east, so it's so as to avoid those trees as recommended by council. So obviously the standard of that road is not at an adequate standard at the time. So the applicant is proposing to construct that road to an appropriate standard and obviously construct the intersection of Baronga Road in accordance with council's requirements. And that would also meet the requirements to RFS standards, which are one of the conditions of consent being recommended. Another point just on the road is the applicant's agreement to remove the footpath on Borubi Road. There was some concerns around the width of that area of impact. So the applicant has agreed to remove that footpath and is instead recommending that that be placed at the bottom of the subdivision and linking through the reserve, which was one of the options for where the road might have gone, but at least there would then still be the link. And then the intersection, which has been discussed, obviously the only thing I'll say on that is that the traffic report's been put forward, and we note that council's officers have assessed that as well. So just finally, just to sum up, we are of the opinion that the proposal has responded to access and servicing in the most appropriate and practical manner as it can. The applicant fully supports the recommended conditions of consent by council, and has made some changes that they believe would help deliver an appropriate outcome for the land. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and happy if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Any questions for Mr. Hunter, councillors? Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. We've spent a lot of time talking about the beginning of Borubi Road, that intersection. We haven't spent any time talking about the other end of it, where there's a rather deep gully with a very large stormwater drain buried at the depths of it. How is the developer proposing to get Borubi Road across that largish gully with stormwater drainage?
So excuse me, there's some indications there of some culverts along Borubi Road that would obviously have to be designed. Scott, is that correct? Scott might be able to jump in on the design aspect.
Yeah, SJE have put a preliminary design to council back several months ago now, which included culverts. It's just a culvert type crossing, so on the creek.
Follow up? I tend to envisage a culvert as something like a pipe covered with a bit of dirt or something. This drainage gully strikes me as being close to needing a bridge to get across it. Are we certain that a culvert type crossing will be suitable?
The culvert crossing seems to make a lot of sense in that the size that they've made the culvert is a lot larger than existing culverts further downstream on the same stream. So they're being very conservative in their approach, and that's what they're recommending.
Thank you. Councillor Glycan, question.
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. I note the application is for 43 lots, and that a number of the speakers tonight have spoken against the development only because of the number of vehicles that would be using the exit road. So they have not spoken against the development as a whole. My question is, would it be feasible for the developer, noting that they have had some part, it would appear, historically, in why it is no longer possible to use Keitler's Road as the in and out road or the connection of? Would it be possible for this developer to consider halving the number of potential allotments down to, say, 23 or thereabouts, therefore reducing the number of vehicles that would be using that road? Is that a possibility? Has the proponent actually considered that?
Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question for you, Mr. Mayor. I think that question is more appropriately passed to Mr. Hunter as representing the applicant. I don't think I could speak on their behalf.
Mr. Hunter.
I can't really comment on the developer's thought process around number of lots. The only comment that I would make is that obviously there's a fair investment in the construction of Borubi Road. That is a significant road that has to be constructed. And the other point, which I didn't really talk about, but you could probably see it if you go back to the lot layout, is that the lots proposed here aren't at the lower end of the minimum lot size. So they're up closer to 1,000 square metre lots rather than, not the 450 sort of the standard, but 700 and 800 is often what you find in most of the estates. So the developer probably has already picked a a larger average lot size than what they would generally envisage in these areas. So my comment would be that the cost effectiveness of delivering that road will diminish with dropping the lots any further.
So did you have any idea what the cost estimate for the road and the culvert or bridge would be, Mr. Hunter?
Do we have a figure?
Ballpark?
Not off the top of my head, no. No, sorry.
No. Okay. Thank you. Just in relation to that, Mr. Christie, in relation to, we spoke about the trees before, there was discussion in the report about moving the road to the east to avoid impingement on the trees on the left, but there are 3 large stands on the right. So are we contending that the road would include removal of those trees or be on the edge of those trees?
Thank you for the question. And for you, Mr. Mayor, the idea is that it's to avoid the trees at all possible. And by pushing it to the east gives the greatest opportunity to avoid those trees. We'd like, and the removal of the footpath obviously removes the need to construct additional works over on that eastern side if you're moving it over, western side, sorry. So the idea would be that, yes, it would avoid them as much as possible. So we'd like to think so.
So Mr. Collins just pointed as his first speaker, the trees on the eastern side may be the ones that would be impacted in terms of root growth if they were excavated around.
If there was to be some impact.
Not the ones on the left.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. No further questions, Mr. Hunter. Thanks for your presentation and thanks for joining us tonight, and all the speakers tonight. Thank you for your feedback. We have one more speaker and that's to a different item. So we'll be considering the DA in the body of the main meeting. So you're welcome to watch the Zoom feed and follow the debate. And the people in the chamber, you're happy to stay and witness the movements of council till that item comes. I think it's the first item on the agenda anyway. Okay, our last speaker is Mr. Noel Jackling, and he's speaking in relation to item 13.7, which is the draft IVA collection policy, and he's proposing an alternate recommendation. So it appears we've got another councillor. Mr. Jackling.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I wanted to just indicate that the draft IVA collection policy, I think, is already a good document, but I think there are some changes that could be made that would improve it further. When I started to examine this thoroughly, what emerged was a difference in vision. And that is that the existing policies around the museum focus very much on, quite properly focus very much on a municipal museum that tells the municipal stories. But the difficulty that we face here is that the IVA story is not only a local story, but it's also an international story. And it does have a collection that is state heritage listed, which has its own significant values, which are broader than those of a municipal museum. So that some of the things that I'll say in a moment relate to that kind of difference in vision. And I suppose to add to that, my vision really is one of taking something that is very special to us and using that to make a difference for the city of Albury. That is to say, provincial cities and other places all wish to demonstrate that they are different from some other city, because that's a means of attracting visitors and of developing tourism. And so that's the way in which I envisage the IVA collection as moving, not only using the collection, but also using the restored aircraft when it is restored, currently out at the airport. So when we come to my suggested change point A, this picks up the point that the current preamble to clause 5.2, it makes no reference to the state heritage listing or to the values that are encompassed by that listing. And so what I have done is designed to attract those values so that the testing that is done for items to be acquired is tested against that broader state heritage listing values. I should also indicate that I have had communications with Heritage New South Wales, and that the wording that I have incorporated in this provision is wording which has been supplied to me by Heritage New South Wales. Then if we move on to to point B, and that's what I've sought to do is to add some additional items into 5.2. And the first one of those is material related to the crash of the Iver in Iraq. Now, relating to that, that wouldn't normally come in because it's not directly related to the McRobertson race, although I view it as a critical part of the Iver story. And the reason why I'd like to see this in is because there are a number of critical elements of the Iver story. The emergency landing in Albury, the visit of the Netherlands East Indies delegation in December of 34, the crash of the Iver in 34, and then the January visit to Java of Alfred Waugh, and the August 1935 visit of Waugh to the Netherlands. The absolute success and fating of Mayor Alfred Waugh in Java and the Netherlands cannot be properly understood unless the preceding three elements, including the crash, are also understood. And just to emphasise too that I don't think there's going to be much material that will come forward at all in this regard because it mostly doesn't exist. What would be relevant would be something a little over 40 photographs, which are photographs of the crash and of the Iver at Schiphol Airport with the passengers and crew who were shortly to fly to their demise. So on that basis, I think that it would be good to include the Iver crash, but that's not a matter that I did directly discuss with Heritage New South Wales. Now, the next one is C. And again, this involves an addition, samples of material related to the Iver representative DC-2 aircraft in, beg your pardon, materials that explain the reasons behind the Iver's ultimate success in the McRobertson International Centenary Air Race. Again, I think this would affect a slight broadening, because that means that you could understand, for instance, the Iver as a trial to test the feasibility of a passenger service to Australia, whereas in 1931, the flight of the Able Tasman was to test the feasibility of an airmail service to Australia. That succeeded and was the precursor to the successful flight of the Iver, and it has as a common element that pilot Jan Mol was a pilot both in the Able Tasman and in the Iver, so that the success of the Iver is partly related to the fact that one of its pilots had previously made a flight to Australia in 1931.
Mr. Jackling, you're about 2 minutes over at this point. Did you
Oh,
have
I beg
anything
your
you
pardon.
can
Then I'll
provide as
summarise.
a conclusion?
Yes, okay. Well, 5.3 is just to reduce to really exclude the exclusions, which in my opinion should be taken up in a collection plan, which accords with my experience at Museums Victoria. And then item 3 simply takes up this difference in vision and seeks to amend the overarching policies so that, at least with respect to state heritage listed collections, the scope for collection is broadened. And the last one of number 4 takes up the it acknowledges that it's now 4 years or so since the state heritage listed policy was listed. Since the collection was listed on the state heritage register, and says that it would be a good idea to have a look now as to whether it might be feasible to go one step further and take it to national heritage listing. And therefore, this goes back into this issue of Albury with a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackling. Any questions, councillors? No? Okay. Well, thank you for your recommendations, and of course will be considered in the body of the meeting, Mr. Jackling. And of course, you again can watch the result of the meeting on Zoom on our website through our YouTube platform. So thank you to all the speakers in tonight's public forum, and thank you for your time and your energy, and all those issues on both matters will be considered in due course in the body of tonight's meeting. So thanks again, and we thank you for coming tonight and giving us that information. Okay, we now need to start the council meeting, the official council meeting for Monday, the 11th of October. We'll start by the opening prayer. We go stand, please. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision-making, protect us in the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. Okay, I must inform you that this meeting is being recorded and webcast. Yeah. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Albury City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations received by the chair. I have received one, and it's from Councillor King, and it is in relation to item 13.4. It is a pecuniary interest significant, and the action is he has a professional relationship with some of the tenderers. The action is to leave the chamber or be put in the room whilst the issue is being discussed, or the matter is being discussed. Thank you, Councillor King. Mr. Zachnich, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The advice to the council meeting regarding political donations disclosure under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. The Act under section 10.4 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of the council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on the council's website or from the customer service centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific planning matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Accordingly, the provisions of section 4.151 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing planning issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of council under the Environmental Planning Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan, or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 9.3 of Part 9 of that Act. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Zaknich. We have no apologies. Everyone is here and accounted for. We have Councillor King and Councillor Cameron on Zoom at this present time, so we're all accounted for. CM5, Merrill Minute. There are no Merrill Minutes. Action plans. Thanks, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the following action plans be received and noted. 1, actions complete for noting only. 2, actions awaiting response from external parties. 3, actions in progress, and 4, long-term issues more than 3 months.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have a question from Councillor Doxey. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note in the papers that there is information in relation to CCTV. I'd like to ask council staff, the appropriate member, with the recent assault on the police officer in Dean Street, was council asked to provide information to help affect the prosecution of these cowards?
Ms. Code.
Thank you for the question, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Salisbury City was asked to provide footage. It went through our due process, and we have been informed by the police. They were very thankful, and it was very, very helpful in the prosecution.
Thank you. Follow up.
Accordingly, I want to thank my fellow councillors who supported CCTV in Dean Street, and we're now moving towards Lavington, where it also is needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, question from Councillor Glacken. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, through you, to the most relevant member of staff. With reference to page 20, additional air services. Can the staff please provide us with an update? I appreciate that it should not be within this meeting, but can I ask for a verbal update or an email to be sent to us in the near future?
Thank you, Ms. Squire. Is that okay? Absolutely. Having trouble with your mask there? Join the club.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm happy to provide an update by email post-meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting held on Monday, the 27th of September 2021. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to move the following recommendation as a motion that the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, 27 September 2021 at 7 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken.
Happy to support that.
Thank
Second
you.
that.
Councillor Doxey, did you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you.
Thank you. There appears to be no question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There are no reports from community forums. There are no notice of motions or rescission. No presentations, deputations, no reports of minutes of committees and working parties, and no documents for sealing. So we're up to CM 13.1, officers' reports for consideration, development application 10.2021.38, 281.1, 43 lot Torrens title subdivision, tree removal 186 Keitlers Road and Borubi Road, Springdale Heights. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an alternate motion, if I might, which I will speak to when Terence gets up. Good. I move that Council A receives the contents of this report, and B, resolves to refuse to grant development consent to development application 10.2021.38281.1 for 43 lot Torrens title subdivision and tree removal at 186 Keitlers Road and Borubi Road, Springdale Heights, for the following reasons. 1, the development is contrary to the provisions of section 4.15(1)(b) of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, as it will have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the adjoining property owners in the locality, including traffic, noise and air quality and social impact. And 2, The development is contrary to the provisions of section 4.15(1)(d) of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, as it will have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the adjoining property owners in the locality, including traffic, noise, and air quality and social impact.
Thank you. Councillor King. Councillor King.
Second that.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to open debate on the item?
Sure. Look, as stated by some of the earlier speakers, there's probably nothing particularly wrong with the development itself. It's a rather unexciting 43 lot, reasonable sized blocks. That's all fine. The problem is access. I did drive up there on the weekend, and we've spent a lot of time tonight talking about Borubi Road and the intersection of Borubi Road and Baronga Drive. But look, I just want to take you back to Keitler's Road and the way I got to this paddock in the middle of Springdale Heights. So I did a right turn into Algona Road and drove up this twisty road. Then I did a left turn onto Barrenbale Way and drove up Barrenbale Way to a right turn at Baronga Drive, which is also very twisty and getting narrower and narrower the whole time. And to be honest with you, I barely saw Borubi Road because it looks like a driveway. The only road in Albury, I think, worse than Borubi Road is probably Burma Road. Anyway, so, you know, access, and then, of course, Borubi Road itself is a bit of a track that ends at a farm gate. And then there's an enormously deep culvert at the end of it. And then there's the paddock. So access to this subdivision from Keitler's Road is, to be frank, almost as bad as driving down the Great Ocean Road, and probably almost as dangerous. Some of those roads are reasonably wide, but the closer you get to Borubi Road, the narrower they get. There's houses on both sides, obviously full of families and children and dogs and cats. There's parking on the roadside, which further narrows these roads. So even before you get to Borubi Road, things are looking pretty challenging. And might I add, not only just for the eventual future residents of this proposed development, but what about the heavy machinery that's going to have to get up there and do the developing? I mean, 20-tonne excavators on low loaders are substantial pieces of equipment, and I think that they're going to have a lot of trouble getting them up there, and there's going to be a lot of adverse impacts on the local residents. So, look, I'm not going to bang on about this for hours and hours. It's the development itself is an adequate kind of a development, but road access to the development is, to be frank, ludicrous. The only reasonable way of getting reasonable road access to this development is directly from Keitler's Road, and the developer has shot himself in the foot by selling the plot of land that road could have gone through. So that's too bad. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a speaker against, but I have a question. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. If this alternative motion put forward by Councillor Stutchbury and King is indeed carried this evening, can the staff clarify what opportunity the developer might have to, what opportunities would be before the developer to be able to deal with a possibility, what might be possible as a refusal here tonight? Would it be to the possibility also include being able to resubmit plans, and what opportunity might that provide for that developer as far as council is concerned? Thank you.
Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question for you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a few options in front of them. One of them obviously is that they accept the decision of council and leave the block as is. Another option is they decide to appeal the decision of council. So that either could be by seeking a review of council's decision, in which case it would come back to council, but they can try to address some of those reasons that council's exposed, but not fundamentally change the development. They could also obviously seek a judicial review, e.g. appeal to Land Environment Court, or then a fourth option in front of them obviously is to try to look at an alternative application and then come to us with that, whether that application looked at access through the adjoining property or through some other form of ways to deal with the access. So they would be the four main options that I could see in regards to this application should council resolve to refuse it.
Thank you. Can I seek clarification there? You said cannot be fundamentally different. Would it be fundamentally different if they used the same in and out road that they've proposed, but went down to say 25 development blocks, or would that be considered to be fundamentally different? Would it be fundamentally different if they attempted to have the two roads, as was suggested, I think, by the first speaker? Would that be fundamentally different again?
Mr. Christie?
Yep, thank you for the question, and to you, Mr. Mayor. And in some ways, it'll be difficult for me to fully answer it because obviously it's a matter of scale when it comes in. Yeah. But something as fundamental as changing the access road, say from Kitelers instead of Borubi, and turning Borubi into either a non-event or an obvious by design secondary road, that to my impression would be a fundamentally different application. Same as if you were similar, if you'd come through from an alternate street as well. And same then, again, I guess halving the scale of development down from 43 to 25 or 20, I would consider fundamentally different. Same as doubling or adding an extra 20 lots would also be what I would consider to be fundamentally different there for a new application.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking against the motion that's currently on the screen, and just to clarify my position, I'm not in favour of the recommendation to approve this development tonight either. If this motion is lost, I'd be moving an alternate motion that we defer a decision and not make one this evening. And I'll speak to the detail of why that is. I think we've been put in a pretty vexed position with this development. And I firstly wanted to thank the staff for their attention to tree preservation through conditions of consent, and also thank the developers for agreeing to those conditions. It's more attention than we usually see to that aspect of a development, and I was really pleased to see that. We've unfortunately got a block of land that's zoned for residential development that no longer has access to it to really adequately facilitate residential development, and the historical factors that led to that being the case are completely outside of our control. This really hinges on the access road, and the reason I suggest deferral is the questions that I asked in the public forum that were taken on notice, I think, are really critical to this, that if the critical limitation to access from Kitelers Road is the transgrid infrastructure, and that option hasn't been fully exhausted, I don't think we're actually in a position to be considering this tonight. So I would be moving that we defer a decision and request that the applicant have that discussion with Transgrid, noting that they did already have it with Essential Energy. I understand that that may come at significant cost, but there's also the potential that that would then come at the saving of not having to upgrade Borubi Road, which could then be a secondary or an emergency access road only, with the primary access being off Kitelers Road. I don't know if it's possible, but I think that would be a really satisfactory solution to an otherwise vexed development, and I don't feel comfortable making a decision until we're sure that that option has really been exhausted. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Speaker 4, Councillor Thurley.
I'm in a bit of a vexed position myself now, having listened to Councillor Con's debate. I firstly would have to say that in terms of the quality of the subdivision, this is one of the better ones we've had. Average lot sizes of around 1,000 square metres. We're often dealing with 400 square metres. This does not disturb what is basically a rural setting. It would be a good subdivision, but I have no doubt the access is the major problem, and I just can't really see that access along Borubi Road is any way sensible way to go. I may vote against this motion in favour of what Councillor Con appears to be proposing. To get some more information from Essential Energy Transgrid about what's possible and what's not possible. I know they have guidelines, but a guideline is something that's a general condition that exists, and often there are local and specific conditions that could change that guideline. I'd like to see those explored. I do understand we're talking about high voltage transmission, and that has a significant difference to lower voltages. We are talking about 130 kilowatts, I suspect. So there are some issues. I couldn't approve the subdivision as it stands, and I was intending to vote in favour of Councillor Stutchbury's motion. But perhaps a better way to go about it is to explore the other options and get the developer to come back to us at a later stage. If he comes back and says there's nothing I can do or nothing I want to do, then we have to make the choice. But at this stage, I'm probably swinging Councillor Con's way. I would rather wait and see. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I too would foreshadow an alternate motion. I have serious concerns about access, and my alternate motion would seek to try and get the applicant to exhaust all potential accesses into this new subdivision, looking at Borubi Road, Barook Place and Keitler's Road. So not just having Keitler's Road as an option, but I think that they look at every possible option to try and get safe and effective access to this new subdivision. So I think Councillor Stutchbury, and it's very difficult sometimes to read Councillor Stutchbury's mind, but I would try and put myself in his position and say, because of the access situations, let's knock this back. I'm suggesting that let's not knock it back yet until all potential avenues for safe and effective access to this new subdivision are explored and exhausted, if that's what is finishing up happening. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. So would it be possible that what you're proposing be part B of what Councillor Con is proposing?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find myself supporting the motion before us, not only because of access, which is a major concern, but also we need to listen to the residents that have taken the time. They've taken the time to make submissions. Let's listen to the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Are there any further speakers for Councillor King?
Yeah, I'm supporting Councillor Stutchbury's thoughts on this. The access is very, very poor. We saw by the slides given out by the residents, a lot of the entry points don't meet the minimum standard, and I just think the access is the integral part of it, and it doesn't meet the standard. So I think it should be knocked back.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Glycan.
Thank you. I have immense sympathy with the motion on the board because of the access. And listening to the speakers tonight, it was clear that it was primarily around the access. They weren't against necessarily the development. It was simply, or primarily, the access and the use of a much smaller feeder road. And it was very well described by Councillor Stutchbury when he spoke earlier this evening. I, however, would like us really to offer the developer an opportunity. We clearly want to see developments here. It's been already raised this evening by another councillor that this is probably one of the better development applications that we have at the moment. And I think we should be supporting this developer by providing them an opportunity to find an alternative way. Councillor Vanderven has raised the possibility of trying to gain access via to Keitler's Road. Clearly, the property has been sold, but it doesn't mean that they could not attempt to procure some land to enable that to go ahead through Keitler's Road, and perhaps with purchasing a slither of land, or if it's possible to buy a slither of land alongside the power lines that might enable such access as an opportunity. So I agree with enabling the developer or affording the developer the opportunity to look at other alternative areas for access. So whilst I agree there are some issues with access. I don't think we should be saying no to this development tonight, but instead offering further opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Glacken. Any further speakers for or against? Just a question, Mr. Christie, in relation to the original application for this particular DA, when was it submitted? Do you know?
Thank you for the question. It was, I believe, in March, but I could, because we advertised it, it was lodged on the 16th of March, 2021.
So in terms of the point that councillor Vandervan made, and I've had this discussion with you prior to the meeting in relation to the options available for ingress and egress to that site, we canvassed the Baruch Court or place option, did we not? Or they did?
Thank you for the question for you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and that's outlined in our report that they had indicated seeking staff approval or consideration for an access through Baruch Place, and that we'd indicated at that time that we didn't support it from a staff perspective, crossing council parkland as they had alternatives.
So when I looked at that yesterday and walked up that corridor, it's the green space we're talking about is littered with garbage and rubbish and is fairly underdeveloped. Surely anything we did in there or the developer did in there would be an improvement. I see a path going through there. So the plan is to have a footpath through there already, is that right?
Thank you for the question for you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that was one of the requirements I talked about earlier as an alternate access point, was to put a pedestrian path through Baruch Place rather than along Borubi that allowed the road to be moved to the east and smaller.
Okay, thank you. Okay, councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to close debate on your item?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour, councillor Stutchbury, councillor Doxy, councillor Mack, councillor King, and councillor Cameron, yes. Those against, councillor Con, councillor Glacken, councillor Thurley, and councillor Vandervan. The motion is successful. Thank you, councillor Stutchbury. It is carried. Okay. So 13.2 Heritage Study Review Project Scope and Stakeholder Engagement Plan. Thank you. Anyone? Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the council endorses the Heritage Study Review Project Scope and Stakeholder Engagement Plan.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Not particularly. I think the document sets out the scope of this study, and I think it's an admirable scope, and I think something that's very valuable, especially considering Indigenous history in this area will be included in this study.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or debate? No. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 13.3, the Wonga Wetlands Water Main Contract number 21/02109. Thank you, councillor Stutchbury.
Mr. Mayor, I move that council accepts the tender from Abbott Construction Proprietary Limited for contract number 21/02109 Wonga Wetlands Water Main, McLeod Court to Wonga Wetlands for the lump sum amount of $494,588.99, which includes GST.
Thank you, councillor Vandervan.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Stutchbury, did you wish to speak to that?
Not overly, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further question or debate? Just one, Mr. Wallen, in relation to the qualitative part of the report. I see that Abbott Construction, have they done any water mains work previously? Is there any evidence of water main work? I note they've done sewage and drainage. I'm just wondering, is there any evidence of them doing, it's a substantial job, this one, around over 2.5 kilometres. Is there any evidence to verify that they've actually done a big water main contract?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Abbott Construction has undertaken water main projects, however, not for Albury City.
Okay, thank you. No worries. Okay. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 13.4, Traffic Management Plan Contract number 21/02052. Can we have councillor King put in the waiting room? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, can we move it, please? Councillor Stutchbury, your light's on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A accepts the tender panel contract from 1300 Roads Proprietary Limited, trading as Trafficking, Stadelman Traffic Proprietary Limited, and Riverina Traffic Service Proprietary Limited for the provision of full service traffic management services, contract number 21/02052, provision of traffic management services 2021 to 2023 at an estimated value of $1,270,000, including GST, and B, accepts the tenders panel contract from 1300 Roads Proprietary Limited, trading as Trafficking, and Ovington King Proprietary Limited for the provision of portable variable message signs, contract number 21/02052, provision of traffic management services 2021 to 23 at an estimated value of $51,000, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to speak to that?
Not particularly.
Thank you. Pardon? No, he's just got his camera. There he is. Okay, there appears to be no further debate or questions. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. If Councillor King can be brought back into the meeting, thanks. There he is. Oh, there he isn't. Okay, we're up to 13.5, which is the regional curbside waste collection contract update. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A participates in the collaborative procurement request for tender for regional curbside collection services to commence 1 July 2024 for the collection, disposal and processing of the following services. 1, collection and disposal of curbside municipal solid waste, MSW services. 2, collection and processing of curbside recycling, commingled services. 3, collection and processing of curbside food and garden organics, FOGO services. B, endorses the draft stakeholder engagement plan, and C, endorses the draft memorandum of understanding.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Very happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to
that? Briefly, I think we've had a report from staff previously. This is an exciting opportunity. Albury already leads the way in this field, and it's good that other people seem to see that we're doing it and want to join in. I think it's a very exciting opportunity and a great opportunity for this region to lead the state in waste and recycling.
Thank you. Councillor Point, you turn your light off? Yep. Okay. Councillor King, did you wish to speak? Or
no, it's Cameron.
Cameron. What do we got there? Against. Okay, speaking against. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm trying to conserve bandwidth. I've got a very poor connection where I am.
Yeah.
Look, essentially, I believe that I didn't move a contrary motion or an amendment or anything like that because I believe this will be supported by the majority of the current council. What I would ask councillors to consider, though, personally, I believe we should be moving towards an internal provision of our curbside collection. I believe the report doesn't explore that option adequately, in my opinion. And I would also consider that a very significant contract like this, with 2 months to go, it would probably be better off being made by the incoming council of new councillors.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Speaker 4, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. I actually don't agree with the previous speaker, Councillor Cameron, because I don't think it's 2 months to go. And I don't think I think that the staff did look at an internal model. I know someone some weeks ago suggested that you could buy 3 garbage trucks and run it yourself. It states very clearly in the report that there is significant infrastructure required to be able to undertake an internal model by ourselves. We also know from the report that the regulations are so significant that it would take considerable time for us to be able to gain the approval to be able to run our own facility rather than using the Albury waste facility and a combined opportunity. We also know that the waste facilities and the Halve Waste program that we as Albury City and our region have participated in have made significant inroads to the greenhouse gas and carbon waste. We also know that the facility has enabled us to bury significantly less into the waste facility or our waste facility at Albury. We also know that it has offered immense opportunities for recycling, as raised by Councillor Thurley, recycling and reuse opportunities. In essence, this is a fantastic opportunity that we as a region and Albury City have to work together to continue to do such a magnificent job that is noted across Australia as being leading in such a facility and such a waste management system and holistic program. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further speakers for or against or questions? Just to tidy up the end there, I'm speaking for in relation to the notion that we would run this ourselves. It would be at a prohibitive cost, and certainly to be able to purchase the fleet of trucks to do all the services and then provide the staff and have the infrastructure that we already have in play with alternative contractors, it would be futile. What I would say, with 3 years to go on the contract, that the service has reduced the waste to landfill by 50%. I would say that in the last 3 months, we've received a national award for the waste facility and the work that's been done by the staff in that facility, which in itself is acknowledgement that what is being done at the moment is working. So I'm look forward to, well, I won't need to look forward to it, but I look forward to this service continuing because I think it does tick all the boxes. And I think, again, it's a credit to all the staff that have been here from its genesis to today. I was having a meeting today with some Wodonga people and they said they were going to the tip. I said, the tip, would that be the transfer station in Wodonga? They said, yes. I said, have you been up to the Albury one? No, that's too far. And there was a gentleman at the table, he said, well, I live in Albury and I go up there and it's like you could eat your food off the road. It's that clean. So long gone are the times when it used to be the tip. It's certainly a waste facility and it's a state-of-the-art facility. So thank you very much to the staff and everyone involved. Councillor Vanham, do you wish to speak for?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with your comments. And when this was previously mooted that we do the service in-house, I was quite amused to see that the suggestion was that we could buy a couple of garbage trucks and do this service ourselves. Now, as a previous owner of a service company to Cleanaway, their facility has currently 40 garbage trucks. New, they're around the $490,000 mark. 18 of those trucks are earmarked for Albury services and the rest for the outlying LGAs. So maybe the people who are suggesting that we do that whole service in-house should perhaps get a grasp on reality. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Councillor King, did you wish to speak for?
I think Councillor Vanderman was referring to me. The spirit in which I mentioned that we look at doing this activity in-house was to actually go back to where it all started. A lot of things where we start and say this is a good idea, and then it morphs itself into something like what we have now with our waste collection. I'm not sure that we actually went back and said, okay, we did this, it's been going for 10 or 12 years, and actually have a look and do a model to see if, in fact, and do a proper business case, whether doing it in-house was feasible, whether it was economically viable, and then either discard it or accept it. Now, being mocked by my quest to look at what we do and is it the right thing to do, and are we going to be able to save money for the residents and ratepayers? You know, I think it's pretty poor form on those people trying to get a strike on me, but in anything we do on this council, we should all revisit the reasons that we went there and is it working? And if it's not working, then we change it. So just want to clarify where the spirit of what I said was in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Are we speaking for the motion or against the motion?
I'm speaking for it, but I just wanted to clarify a few of the smart comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe there may have been an in-house study in relation to this. Can I ask staff to confirm, please?
Thank you. Mr. Miller, can you verify? I believe there was when our first term of council was done, but Mr. Millett or Mr. Ferris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I might have to defer to Mr. Ferris on that one.
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'm certainly not aware of an in-house for our curbside collection. Obviously, it's been in place since 2012. This current contract and previous regional contracts date back to the early 90s.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to close debate?
Briefly, enough's been said. Just to clarify with Councillor Cameron's comment that it should wait 2 months for a new council. This is not, we're not awarding any contracts or tenders tonight. We are endorsing a draft stakeholder engagement plan so that we can start to talk to potential tenderers and contractors. We've got until 2024 for this to begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 13.6, the Albury City Corporate Success Pillars, Measures and Targets. Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I move the recommendations. The motion that Council A receives and notes the Albury City Corporate Success Pillars 2020-2021 results, and B, endorses the Albury City 2021-22 Corporate Success Pillars, Measures and Targets.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Vanderman, did you wish to speak to that?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Any further question or debate, councillors? No. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 13.7, the draft Oliver collection policy submissions from public exhibition. Thanks, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I intend to move the proposed motion that Mr. Jackling showed in his presentation, which I understand has been forwarded to Terence. I don't know why I got involved. I've got to read this one. It's too big. Okay. I move that Council A adopts the revised draft Ivor collection policy with the following changes. 1, paragraph 5.2, the preamble to be replaced with the following. The Ivor collection should include and accept material of the following kind that is consistent with the state's significant values of the Ivor collection as outlined by the State Heritage Register listing. 2, paragraph 5.2, after the words representative Ivor commercial material manufactured in the period that followed the Ivor event, insert the following new line. Starting to even fog up here. Material related to the crash of the Ivor in Iraq. 3, paragraph 5.2, after the words samples of material related to the representative DC-2 aircraft, including material related to advocacy for the retention of the Ivor Memorial DC-2 as part of Albury's social history, start a new line and insert the following. Material that explains the reasons behind the Ivor's ultimate success in the McRobertson International Centenary Air Race. 4, paragraph 5.3, replace the whole of paragraph 5.3 with the following. The Albury City Ivor collection should exclude geopolitical materials unless in better condition or with strong provenance and connected stories. B, updates the public policy and procedure register with the finalised Ivor collection policy document. C, asks the Albury City Museum and Social History team officers when next reviewing the Albury City Cultural Assets Development and Management Policy and the Albury City Cultural Collection Development Plan 2015-2020 to recommend the incorporation of suitable provisions with respect to any state heritage listed collection to facilitate the acceptance of material that is consistent with the state significant values of that collection as outlined by the State Heritage Register listing, And D, ask the Albury City Museum and Social History Team officers to investigate the feasibility and cost, including the cost of the heritage consultant, of nominating the Ivor collection for National Heritage listing and reporting back to Council by March 2022.
Very long motion. Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to open debate?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to, I think, reiterate probably the first comment that Mr. Jackling said. The report we have is a great report. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it was bad. But when we first started this discussion and debate, we asked that the policy be broadened so that we could reflect the international importance of this event. We have a great team of people restoring this plane at considerable cost and effort to themselves. And whatever we can do to promote this restoration is a great idea. As Mr. Jackling has said, and as other speakers have noted in the past, this presents a unique opportunity to showcase Albury throughout the world, and not just in a local level or even at a state level. Couple of minor technical points. I don't believe we need to have an exclusion clause in the policy. If the inclusion words are good enough, that will tell us what we can take, and it will also, by inference, tell us what we shouldn't be taking. So I think that we have already a great policy, but I think it can be improved, and I believe that these few changes will enable us to promote the Ivor event and the City of Albury to a greater extent by using the collection as part of that commemoration.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I concur with Councillor Thurley. I note in the chamber we have some museum staff here. Is it possible to ask them what their thoughts or comments are in relation to the inclusion of what's on the screen now?
Ms. Code, are you able to speak on their behalf? Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question through, Mr. Mayor. It is a really complex issue. It has not been simple to work through it. And I think Mr. Jackling describes it really well when he said it's about the vision. It's about the vision for a local Albury Regional Museum. Now, we have sought advice from State Heritage New South Wales, as we were instructed to do, and they have come back and said to us that the main focus of the listing is for the Ivor story and its emergency landing in Albury. They have said that the State Heritage listing is very broad. They had a State Heritage listing and the Ivor proposed collection policy. They're not competing with each other. They are just different. They have a different focus. The State Heritage feedback or letter has come to us. They have said that consequently, as State Heritage listing is so broad, due to the scope of the challenge for Albury City Council, it is to develop a policy that limits the collection in accordance with the space, storage and funding restrictions, as well as existing policies of the Albury Library Museum. So yes, the State Heritage listing is very broad. However, we are working within our endorsed policies, Albury City cultural policies, which when we were listed in 2017, on Schedule A, it said that we could and we will be limiting our policy collection to what is relevant to Albury in our local area. As it says that we have in Schedule C, all activities and works are in accordance with the Albury City Cultural Asset Development Management Plan and Cultural Assets Policy, which has a focus for Albury and the Albury region. If we collect everything to do with the Ivor, we are competing with others like the Aviation Museum, the Victoria Museum, the UMCT. There are others who can collect other areas as well. We need to focus within our remit so that we can do so properly with integrity and also with a suitable funding and resource constraint. It is not a simple matter, and it's about what vision do we want to have.
Follow-up.
Thank you for that comprehensive overview. I agree. The only word that I saw early was exclude, and Councillor Thurley mentioned the word exclude. From my museum experience, it's sometimes nice to have a second piece. that can enhance a collection. So I wouldn't probably use the word exclude. And I like broad because it gives you ample opportunity into the future. But they're my comments only.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Just one question for a speaker against from myself. In relation to the storyboard out at the current location where the plane is being reconstructed or the copy is being reconstructed, does the storyboard reflect all of the story of the Iver or just the landing in Albury? I suspect it does talk about Iraq and does talk about the pieces that are mentioned in this recommendation. Do you know?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I cannot specifically say what's on the storyboard, but I know that the UMCT remit is broader than ours and their collection policy is broader than ours. So they can have other aspects which are much more beyond the scope of the local regional Albury remit that we have. So yes, they can. There's nothing stopping them.
No, I asked the question because it is a bronze, they are bronze plaques, and if we're to tell a different story to what they're telling, it would look a little bit out of whack. That's all. I just wonder where there's consistency in that messaging. That's all. Okay, speaker against, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I firstly wanted to acknowledge the interest and expertise of Mr. Jackling in the Iver story and note that he did present to us a rationale for this motion tonight in the public forum, but he also made a public submission to the draft policy, and staff have already taken a number of his suggestions and changes on board, but they've also provided rationale and justification in the report for why some of his other suggested changes weren't taken on board. And I'm quite satisfied with the justifications we've been provided by the staff, and I don't support the further amendment being added tonight. We've had previous discussions in earlier stages of this policy about the need for exclusions. I think the staff have demonstrated to us that it has at times been challenging to make decisions around this, and that they're seeking additional clarity. And that was part of their rationale for supporting that being in the policy. So I don't support any further changes to it tonight. Thanks.
Speaker 4, Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a very senior member of the staff of this council once said, the Iver, the gift that keeps giving. It's a wonderful thing, the Iver story, and the memorial aircraft that's being restored in the hangar out of the airport. This was indeed a very good collections policy. It just needed a few tweaks. And Noel's an accepted expert in this area, and I thought that his tweaks, and they're relatively minor, but they have meaning for the collections policy. Those tweaks were worth putting in, and I thank Councillor Thurley for doing so.
Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor King.
Yeah, look, I'll just be brief. My vote is for for Mr. Jackling's persistence in following this through. In 2016, he was the first person that wrote to me, welcoming me aboard, and wrote to me about the Iver, and he was near at the end of the term, and he's still here. So this is a vote for his persistence and his dedication and his passion, and gold star to you, Mr. Jackling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken speaking for, no speakers against.
Yes, just to raise a couple of additional points. One is that I acknowledge the significance of the Albury Regional Museum and of the regional emphasis, and it's a municipal facility. And we're celebrating really the significant areas of history related directly to Albury. However, I think it would be sad if we didn't include other opportunities that were directly aligned. So not indirectly, but directly aligned. And for example, my understanding is that the airframe is still the oldest DC-2 airframe in the world. And I think that is a direct relationship, and therefore we should be celebrating that historically. It's an important aspect. And I wonder how we would deal in the future with collections such as the small component of the collection that we have for the Margaret Court collection. So she has an enormous collection, and we have a small component of that in the museum. How would we sit looking at international recognition of the Margaret Court collection in the future if we were to say it has to have a direct relationship with Albury? So would we only include memorabilia that she had used in Albury or was related to her playing in Albury, or would we be looking at her international fame as well? So I think it's not a direct analogy, but I think we should be looking at the fact that the IVA is a world famous historical event. It's not just about Albury. It's not just about New South Wales historical collection either, or the significance of it. And I think the option for looking at national recognition is extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for, Councillor Vanderman, no speakers against.
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, I think one of the most telling additions to this motion that Councillor Thurley has put forward is that we try and get a national heritage list in which Councillor Gherkin just referred to. And I think that is where we're going to get the international and national payoff in terms of visitor numbers eventually to have a look at all of the stuff that we've got around the IVA, whether it's directly related to the landing in Albury or whether it's related to the whole story of the IVA and what went before and what went after. So I fully support the motion as presented. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Just to finish up, I'd sort of speak against this motion on the basis that whilst Councillor Vanderman and Councillor Gherkin had heard a little bit more about the IVA, I think in the last 9 years, this previous council and this council have achieved a lot more in terms of reprising the airframe and providing the current team with the location they have, which is a great location, and they're doing a great job with the aircraft. However, I reiterate what I said many years ago about the story of the IVA is about the landing in Albury. It's not about the plane. And essentially, the curators at our Albury Museum manage the history of Albury, not the history of the world. And I just don't understand, if we're not confident moving forward that the bronze plaques, which tell the story of the IVA at the location that has now been selected where it's being restored, do not tell this story, then for that cost of replacing those, and like everything else that I've experienced with this particular plane, the IVA restoration team and Mr. Jackling don't seem to be in the same step. So he says one thing and they say another. And a good example of this was when it was proposed that we put a eggshell in the middle of QE2 square with the IVA in it, which was totally against all the ideas of the particular team that are doing all the heavy lifting, which was then proposed again by Mr. Jackling that we do that because he felt very strongly about it. Now, I know he's very strong and very passionate about this particular plane and very passionate about what happened on that particular evening, but does it mean we have to include everything else about the plane, where the rivets came from, where the steel or the aluminium came from? I think the team restoring the plane need to be satisfied and be heard about this particular issue. I don't know that they've had much engagement with Mr. Jackling on this issue, but if it's any indication of previous times, I think the staff, the recommendation they have provided is in line with the work we've done thus far with this particular occasion and what happened when the plane crash landed in Albury. So I won't be supporting the motion. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to close debate?
Yes, Mr Mayor, after that, I certainly need to add a few words. It's got nothing to do with the proposed IVA museum in the square. That was Mr Jackling's idea. It got voted down. It's not going to happen. And if you look seriously, and I understand our staff's issue with storage and collections and so on, you could collect everything and you'd need to hire another 10 warehouses. But if you look carefully at this motion, there's not going to be much more material that comes out of it. And you could not tell me that Mr. War's visits to Java and the Netherlands do not have an Albury connection. After the crash of the plane, he was awarded a Royal Order, the Order of Orange Nassau. The relationship between Mr. War and the Dutch royal family and the Dutch authorities is a strong one. I don't believe there'll be almost anything that collectible that comes out of that, except perhaps a few photos and one or two newspaper articles. It's not going to swamp the Library Museum with a huge amount of stuff. And this policy also includes reference to the Ivan Memorial Community Trust and the way that an item offered to the museum but refused, with the consent of the donor, the UMCT can be asked, would you like to have this? And does the donor consent? So I think that we've probably, I don't think we're going to get swamped with stuff because of this motion. I think it just helps this business of raising the international profile of what happened. It wasn't just a plane landing in Albury that night. It was people all over the world. You can find people in the Netherlands who are listening to the radio and heard about their plane landing in Albury in a violent storm. So I just think that we're not criticising the UMCT and the restorer of the plane. I'm trying to give them a bigger platform to demonstrate what they've done and what they're going to achieve in the next few years. So I commend the motion.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? It doesn't look like Councillor Cameron's camera's on. Yes, he is. He's voting for. Thank you. Voting for the motion. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 14.1, the corporate health indicators for June 2021. Officers' reports for noting. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. I just have to get the, yep, there we go. Move the recommendation as a motion that council receives and notes the June 2021 corporate health indicators report.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman.
I'm happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, to note that it's the final report for last year.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 14.2, the disclosures by councillors, audit and risk improvement committee members and designated persons return 2021. Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I move that recommendation of motion the council receives the notice of report concerning the 2020-2021 annual disclosure of returns by councillors, audit risk and improvement committee members and designated persons.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to speak to that?
No, the document's on the table for people to view should they wish to do so.
It's a very thick document too. Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Any further questions or debate? No. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, Ms Stevens. 14.3, the Audit and Risk Improvement Committee Annual Report. Councillor Glacken.
Move the recommendation as a motion that council receives and notes the Albury City Audit Risk Improvement Committee Annual Report 2020-2021.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that motion?
No, it's a standard report from a relatively new committee.
Thank you. No questions or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.4, the local government elections caretaker period, electoral matter and regulated period and use of council resources for election campaign purposes. Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I move the recommendation of the motion. The council notes the operation of the caretaker period, the regulated period, and the code of conduct obligations regarding the use of council resources during the 2021 local government elections.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions or debate? No. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Yeah, no worries. Look, I'll just finish up with the body of the main meeting. CM15, there are no delegates' reports for noting. CM16, notice of urgent business. Councillor King, you've notified me by email you need a raise a matter of urgent business?
Yeah, look, I want to discuss the carols by candlelight and see if I can get the decision overturned. On the 21st of September, we received an internal correspondence from yourself saying that we've cancelled the carols by candlelight. There wasn't too much detail into that. But 5 days later, the New South Wales government announced the roadmap, 26th of September. And in that roadmap, it said that by 80% double vaccination, that would be able to have 3,000 people at a ticketed event, and that by the 1st of the 12th, there'd be no limit on people at an event, which regardless of whether they had been vaxxed or not had vaccination. We got an email today from staff going into a bit more detail of what the decision was made. There were some points made about the insurance. There were some points made about consulting with external state and national experts, which from external organisations. So I gather not government, promoters, and some other New South Wales councils. And they basically said to organise a cautious and responsible approach to re-engage the community in safe and measured manner. We have the Chief Health Officer saying from the 1st of the 12th, we can have no limit of people, regardless of whether they're vaxxed or not. And given that the initial email that we got on the 21st of September and then 5 days later, I would have thought that that was a very small time frame to try and get a very historic and one of the most community-orientated events that Albury has and has had for a very long time. I appreciate that there is a bit to go into organising these type of events, but I will say that, you know, a stage is a stage, the public toilets are public toilets, the seating is the seating, and that there's portable food vendors out there who are absolutely screaming for this type of event to get back on the horse and start plying their trade. I'm also thinking about the performance and where we get people to sing carols and do some acts and that sort of stuff. And there's a multitude of community groups out there that school groups and school bands that I think we've certainly got enough time to corral together and bring together again this very significant and important community event. And it hasn't been, if this is not run this year, it won't be 2 years that young people and the community have missed out on. It'll actually be 3 years. So what I'm looking to do is to maybe urge Albury City Council to revisit running the event. They have put some alternative community events in botanical gardens and lighting up the CBD, but look, nothing beats a carols by candlelight performance. The report sort of said a couple of other events that have cancelled. Well, in my research today, I found that the Banyule Council on the 18th of the 12th, 2021 are going to run their carols by candlelight. Knox City Council going ahead, but have an alternative plan that if COVID kicks in, that they've got an alternative. Sydney, which is open today and following the Chief Health Officer guidelines, are making an announcement soon. Melbourne has listed theirs for the 24th of the 12th, and their website says, you know, pack a picnic, dust off your Santa clothing and be there. So the Sydney and Melbourne ones are in the hotspots. You know, we're very low on cases. And I really think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't sit down on the next day or so and say, can this be put on? And this would be a really good example to the rest of the community that Albury is open for business and its council is going to be a civic leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Thurley wishes to speak for your proposal, but Councillor Glycan has a question. Councillor Glycan?
simply to ask if we agreed tonight that we would like to have carols by candlelight in whatever variation or form of, noting it wouldn't be as normal, it'd be different. Is it feasible to actually carry it off? Could we achieve it? I think it's a rhetorical question, really. Yes.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. You're quite right. In its current format, it couldn't be achieved because we'd be well into the plans. In fact, we'd almost be at final programming by this stage of the milestones. Can it be achieved in another version? As indicated in the report, we looked at a number of options, including having a themed music in the gardens event with obviously a carols flair to it. Alternate, band, and we are planning on having Albury City Band and others playing in QE2 Square during that December period, and hopefully allowing a similar sort of level of patrons over a longer period of time rather than just over a one-off event.
Okay. Answers yes.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I support the sentiment, but I don't support the concept of having carols by candlelight. The sentiment is that we've been locked down and people need to reconnect with each other. So what I support is pretty much what Mr. Glass sent to us today. I believe we could have an event where we had buskers, where we had food vans available, where we asked people to come and have a picnic in the square. Family groups, small groups meeting together, connecting with each other, with buskers. We had an event over there one night where there was a little chess competitions were going on, and we had Helena Kernigan and Kaori Sparks playing grand piano and violin. Wonderful entertainment. At the other end of the square, you could have Tony Smith and his crazy band. I think we would liven the community up. I don't hold much, I couldn't care less much about carols by candlelight, but I know a lot of people love it. However, I think that the aim is get families, get people back together. And I would remind everyone that the Delta variation of this thing is highly contagious, can be contracted simply by walking past someone who has it. And the first thing they banned when we started COVID was choir singing. Why? Because it's a massive spreader. So I would rather not have a whole heap of people packed in the square singing Christmas carols. I'd like some smaller events. I think Mr. Glass has got it right. 2 or 3 events, three events in December with food vans, some music, some performance acts would be a great way to go.
Okay. Councillor Con, comment?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking against the proposal from Councillor King, also acknowledging the spirit of the suggestion, and I'm also speaking against it with the enthusiasm of someone that was in the Carols by Candlelight Choir in 2017 as a councillor as well. I really support the staff having found reasonable alternatives, and I echo Councillor Thurley's comments about what people need to get out of this, and that we can get that to happen in an alternative form. I think there are a couple of key issues with planning an event that big, that far away. If we've learned anything through COVID, is the only certain thing is that nothing's certain. So uncertainty around what will be happening in December, I think is really important, noting that the Chief Health Officer actually didn't sign off on the reopening plan. The New South Wales government did that without her approval, as I understand from recent media reports, and that it's not just the uncertainty around the day of the event itself, but all of the associated rehearsals, which would be happening now if the event were going ahead. That's months of time for a huge number of enthusiastic volunteers, and you can't ask them to go through that if you're not sure whether the event's going ahead or not. So I think a collection of smaller events is really appropriate, and the staff have adjusted well to the circumstances that we're in.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, comment?
Yeah, look, I'm supporting Councillor King in this matter. If Melbourne and Sydney, the two of Australia's hottest hotspots of COVID, are having carols by candlelight, then why Albury can't have it when we've had about 3 cases in total is beyond me. We've been very risk averse in this community. You know, we banned the rugby team from training, and we've cancelled carols by candlelight. And a couple of weeks ago, with 3 cases of COVID in the community, we cancelled elective surgery. We're incredibly risk averse, And we need to give our residents something to cheer them up, and we need to snap out of our risk-averse behaviour that we've sort of sunk into over the last 18 months of daily press briefings from humorless chief health officers and whatnot. Obviously, if it can't be resurrected in its original form because it's too late, well, that is a pity. But yeah, we just need to find a way of snapping out of our present COVID depression.
Thank you. Any other commentary, councillors? No. I just wish to note that in the last 2 successive weekends, whilst we're concerned about a controlled gathering in the square, QE2 square, for Christmas, for all those people who sit there and have something to eat and drink, soft drink, or generally well behaved, we focus on the last 2 weeks where we've seen probably in the precinct about the same amount over 2 weekends in the hotels and in our streets, shoulder to shoulder in hotels, and they're not 70% vaccinated. And yet we're saying now we'd probably be around 90% by Christmas, depriving our community of a great event. Now, whilst I do understand we can't get the event that we ordinarily would have, I do see the program that Mr. Glass has mentioned in his email. But what I would like to see probably as a middle ground on this issue is some structure around that, and that structure being communicated to the community and to the councillors first, to the community. I think the only solution with an impasse on this issue is to provide rigor around that structure. I understand we can't have the big event. I understand the work and effort that goes into that is 6 months of the year. So I sympathise with that position, but I'd like to see what alternative options are available, and what you've mentioned here with the value add you just mentioned is also useful, but I just think we'd be able to celebrate Christmas and have a little bit more structure, that's all. So, Councillor Con.
Just a process question for you, Mr. Mayor. We've had speakers for and against a suggestion, but no wording of an actual proposal.
Well, my suggestion is, as an impasse, that we get a bit more rigor around what is proposed in this email over the next couple of days. And then if Councillor King, whilst it's not really appropriate, if Councillor King wanted to raise it as an item, as a motion at our next meeting, we could discuss it in full at that meeting if he's not satisfied with that email. So, Councillor King, are you happy with that resolve?
Yeah, look, I am. Again, I'm very conscious of the time factor. I don't want process to be bogging down the whole thing, and all of a sudden we're having motions, and then all of a sudden there's meetings, and all of a sudden we're knocking on Christmas's door unprepared. So, you know, I got your advice on the 21st. I was too late to put a motion in, and then I was advised that it doesn't really fit around a motion to overturn the council staff's work, and it's just, you know, it's a thought that's out in the community now, and you know, I would like your comments and those for it to actually someone convene a meeting tomorrow and say, righto, we've been given a bit of a nod from the council group, what can we do? And hopefully, you know, that will result in something that we're all happy with.
Okay, so I'm happy to raise it at our executive briefing in the morning with Mr. Zachnich
Got it,
and the
Mr.
two
Mayor. Thank you.
deputy CEOs. Mr. Zachnich?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for all the feedback. We'll work on that as a better outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other urgent business items? Otherwise, I'll adjourn for 5 minutes before we go into the confidential item, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
I thought your amendment to my motion might get up. Oh,
No. I've got a new thing about climate adaptation. I see the opportunities.
I can tell you one of the research I work with